They say if a road tries to stop you 3 times, you should turn around and go back. But when you are carrying people down a night highway toward Paris and your minibus punctures a tire for the 3rd time in just a few hours, not even the biggest skeptic will believe in mere coincidence. In moments like these, it begins to seem as if the very darkness outside the window has laid out its invisible traps against you, and every next kilometer could be your last. Andre gripped the leather steering wheel of his large black Mercedes Sprinter tightly, his knuckles turning white. The heavy vehicle confidently held its course toward France, cutting through the thick night fog with its powerful LED headlights. Behind lay a difficult border crossing in Przemyśl, endless hours of waiting in exhausting lines and irritated customs officers. Ahead lay hundreds of kilometers of monotonous, empty European highway, shrouded in a thick autumn dampness. Outside the cabin window, a fine, cold rain rustled without stopping. Heavy drops left long, dirty streaks on the windshield, which were rhythmically wiped away by the large wipers with a characteristic dull squeak. The interior of the minibus had long since fallen into a deep night's sleep. It smelled of strong coffee from roadside vending machines, cheap car air fresheners, and dampness from wet clothes. Passengers dozed relaxedly in their seats, with soft travel pillows or rolled-up warm jackets tucked under their heads. From time to time, Andre cast a quick glance into the rearview mirror. Everything looked completely calm and ordinary. This was a regular, routine international trip, of which there had already been hundreds in his life. But the experienced driver had no idea that this night would turn into a real psychological battle with the road and time. Next to Andre in the front passenger seat, Alexei was dozing. He was a heavily built man of about 45, with heavy, calloused hands and a stern face covered with deep wrinkles. A typical migrant worker, he was returning to a construction site near Paris after a short vacation back home. Alexei was an ideal traveling companion. He remained silent most of the time, did not complain about the cramped space, and simply snored softly, in time with the monotonous operation of the powerful diesel engine. Behind him, in the second row, sat a young couple of students, Marta and Denise. They were traveling for a student exchange program, sharing a single pair of headphones between them and occasionally whispering quietly and restrainedly so as not to wake anyone in the dark cabin. Further back, closer to the right window, sat an elderly woman, Pani Maria, who was going to visit her daughter. She kept nervously fidgeting with a thin handkerchief and looked out the window with fear every time a large international semi-truck overtook them at breakneck speed. And finally, in the very corner of the back row sat Ihor, a young tourist with a huge green backpack that took up almost all the free space on the floor. Ihor was not sleeping. He stared intently at his smartphone screen, vainly catching a weak network signal amid the dense forest. The clock on the dashboard showed 1:45 in the morning when the wheels suddenly made a strange, frightening sound. Suddenly, a powerful, dull impact shuddered through the entire cabin, and the heavy vehicle was pulled sharply, almost uncontrollably, to the right. Andre gritted his teeth, firmly gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and smoothly stopped the Mercedes on the narrow asphalt shoulder of the high-speed Autobahn. The rear left door opened, letting the cold and sticky dampness of the night highway into the warm cabin. The driver stepped out into the pouring rain and inspected the rear right tire with a flashlight. It was completely shredded, and a huge iron construction bolt was sticking out of the rubber. Alexei stepped out of the cabin immediately, followed by Dennis and Ihor. Without a word, the men pulled out a heavy jack, quickly unscrewed the damaged wheel, and put on the first spare donut tire. Within 30 minutes, completely wet and frozen, they returned to the cabin. The bus set off again, accelerating along the wet asphalt. The passengers breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that these minor nightly troubles were over and they could sleep peacefully from now on. But exactly an hour later, as the Sprinter was passing another dark, completely remote forest stretch of the highway, the story repeated itself with frightening, almost mystical precision. Another sudden, dull pop, another heavy, trembling steering wheel in Andre's hands, and another forced stop on the shoulder under a single broken streetlight. This time, the front left tire was completely blown out, and an identical iron piece of rebar was found in the torn rubber. Andre felt a cold sweat run down his spine. 2 spare tires on one trip was already a critical limit for any transport driver. Now, he only had one last old spare tire left in the trunk, which he had been carrying with him since last winter season. The passengers in the cabin were no longer sleeping. Sleep was washed away in an instant, and a heavy, oppressive, and tense silence reigned inside the vehicle. People looked at each other with clear dread. The men took up the tools again, working under the pouring rain in complete silence. The wheel was replaced, the vehicle moved on, but Andrei cut the speed to a minimum of 70 kilometers per hour. They simply had no right to make a mistake or get another puncture. Every sound from under the chassis of the bus now made the driver flinch with tension. The most unexpected and terrifying turn awaited them ahead when just over 100 kilometers remained to the outskirts of Paris. The atmosphere in the cabin was electrified to the limit. Suddenly, the minibus shuddered for the third time. The characteristic, incomparable screech of torn rubber and the metallic impact of the rim against the asphalt were heard. A third puncture in a single night. Andrei, barely suppressing the trembling in his hands, stopped the vehicle at a dark roadside exit. There were no more spare tires left. Mobile network signal was virtually non-existent in this low-lying area, and calling a German or French tow truck at such an hour cost insane, practically astronomical amounts of money. The passengers found themselves completely trapped in the middle of a night highway, risking getting stuck in a cold bus until the very morning. The tension in the cabin reached its peak. Pani Maria covered her face with her hands and began to pray quietly and intermittently. Marta pressed close to Dennis in fear, and Alexei struck the dashboard angrily with his fist. Everyone understood that the situation had become critical. Andrei stepped outside, leaned against the hood, and just closed his eyes in helplessness. And then, through the thick night fog, as if by some strange call of fate, a large white minibus of the exact same model smoothly pulled into this very same dark parking lot. The foreign driver, seeing the 3 damaged tires lying on the asphalt and the confused people under the rain, stopped nearby. He just shook his head in amazement, not believing his eyes. As it turned out, this driver was heading completely empty to the exact same Gare de l'Est in Paris. The man turned out to be incredibly humane. Without any hesitation, he offered not only to lend his own spare tire to Andrei, but to load half of the passengers into his warm cabin to maximally lighten Andrei's damaged Mercedes and reduce the pressure on the old rubber. Moreover, he contacted a 24-hour service station just 10 kilometers away via his professional radio and arranged for a new set of tires to be prepared there. When both minibuses finally entered the morning, still completely empty streets of Paris together, the clock showed exactly 6 in the morning. The great city was just beginning to slowly wake up under the first rays of the sun, and the passengers of the black Mercedes stepped out into the parking lot near the station in absolute, deep silence. But this was no longer the silence of fear or despair. This was the silence of people who had just seen a real roadside miracle and selfless human mutual assistance with their own eyes. People embraced, shook each other's hands tightly, exchanged phone numbers, and sincerely thanked Andrei for his iron nerves, endurance, and high professionalism on such a terrible night. The driver slowly closed the heavy sliding door of the already empty cabin and tiredly looked at the clear morning Parisian sky. He knew for sure that this trip would forever remain in his memory as a special route. A route where even 3 blown-out tires and a treacherous night highway could not defeat humanity, solidarity, and a sincere desire to help someone who fell into trouble. The next time you travel on a long night road, never panic in the face of difficulties and do not lose faith in people. The night highway often tests our strength, throwing heavy trials at us, but it always sends the necessary help exactly when it seems that there is no way out. Take care of yourselves on the road. Always thoroughly check your spare tires and tools before leaving. And may your life routes always end only with a successful arrival and happy smiles.